Grow Your Mindset podcast. Grow your mind. Change your life.
I want to start off today by putting a question directly to you. And I'll warn you right up front, it might be a slightly uncomfortable thing to think about.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is.
Right. It's actually the question that kicked off the entirety of the research we're unpacking today. So I want you to be brutally honest with yourself, just in your own head for a second. When was the last time you did something that was completely disconnected from a screen, and you actually genuinely enjoyed it for at least 30 uninterrupted minutes?
It's the kind of question that forces a very sudden, very quiet kind of self-reflection.
Yeah.
When you pause and really comb through your recent memory, the answer for a lot of people is surprisingly elusive.
That's the thing. I'm talking about a purely tangible activity. Cooking a meal without propping a tablet up on the counter. Painting, playing an instrument, reading a physical paper book.
Right, actual paper.
Exactly. Maybe gardening, fixing a broken hinge on a door, or just going for a walk without a podcast playing in your ears. Anything where you genuinely forgot about the existence of your phone for a solid half hour.
Which is incredibly rare nowadays.
It really is. Now, if a specific memory just popped into your head, that is fantastic. But if you're searching right now, flipping through the mental calendar, and realizing it's been weeks, or maybe even months, since you were truly unplugged, well, this deep dive is custom tailored for you.
The discomfort that arises from struggling to answer that question is incredibly useful, I think. It acts as the perfect entry point into what we're really talking about today.
Absolutely.
Because underlying that simple question is a much larger, much more profound conversation about how we're fundamentally spending our time and, by extension, how we are shaping the very architecture of our minds.
Which brings us to our core mission for this deep dive. You know, on this channel, we are constantly talking about self-improvement, but today we're looking at the absolute foundation of it. Our guiding material today is genuinely fascinating.
That really is unique.
It's actually derived from a transcript originally designed for language learners. Specifically, it was crafted to teach B2 level English vocabulary. But what immediately stood out when reviewing this material isn't the vocabulary itself.
Right.
It's the piercing psychological and behavioral critique embedded within it. The author uses the vehicle of language learning to dissect the modern plague that a lot of people are casually calling brain rot.
The dual nature of the material is what makes it so compelling to me. On the surface, you have this pedagogical tool, but beneath that, you have a remarkably astute observation of modern digital habits.
Yeah.
The insights detailed here regarding how our nervous systems react to constant digital consumption, how we experience mental fatigue, and how our attention spans are eroding. These are universal truths. They completely bypass whatever language you happen to speak and strike at something deeply biological.
It's like a masterclass in behavioral awareness disguised as a language lesson.
Precisely.
So we are going to completely deconstruct this. We need to figure out why we can sit on a couch for 3 hours, do absolutely zero physical labor, and yet feel utterly exhausted.
We've all been there.
We really have. And we'll look at the specific physical mechanics of how our devices hijack our agency, what it actually means when you want to put the phone down, but your hand simply refuses to do it.
That disconnect is wild.
It's terrifying. And from there, we'll explore a concept that honestly shifted my entire perspective. The idea that the feeling we call boredom is actually something else entirely. And finally, we aren't just going to diagnose the problem. We're going to look at the remarkably simple analog defense mechanism that the material suggests. It's a method to rebuild focus and, quite literally, shift your own identity.
It's a vital progression. Before you can implement any meaningful self-improvement strategy, before you can learn a new skill, start a business, or improve your relationships, you have to reclaim your cognitive bandwidth.
You have to.
You have to understand that heavy, sluggish feeling that so many of us have quietly accepted as the normal state of a Tuesday evening.
Let's start right there with that heavy feeling. The material relies heavily on a piece of modern slang that I think perfectly encapsulates the era we are living in, and that's brain rot. Now, we should clarify right out of the gate, as the text carefully does, that this is not a clinical term.
No.
You won't find it in the DSM-5. You can't go to a neurologist and get a prescription for brain rot.
It's a cultural shorthand.
Yeah.
But the fact that this specific phrase has permeated the culture so deeply tells us that it's describing a shared, highly palpable experience.
Definitely.
The text frames it beautifully by comparing the brain's consumption of digital media to the body's consumption of food. Brain rot is the sensation that your mind has been binging on junk content for too long. The result isn't satisfaction or rest. It's a feeling of being heavy, slow, and vaguely depressed.
I want to linger on that junk food analogy because it operates on multiple levels. Think about what happens when you eat a massive bag of cheap, heavily processed potato chips. In the moment you're eating them, the salt and the crunch are intensely satisfying to your taste buds.
Oh, it's engineered to be.
Right. Your brain gets a tiny hit of pleasure with every chip. But 20 minutes after the bag is empty, your stomach doesn't feel nourished, you don't feel energized, you feel bloated, lethargic, and frankly, a little disgusted with yourself.
The biological parallel there is striking. With the chips, you're consuming empty calories, high reward, zero nutritional value. With the short-form videos and endless feeds, you're consuming empty dopamine.
Wow, empty dopamine.
Exactly. Your brain is getting these micro spikes of reward from novel colors, sounds, and faces, but there is no narrative sustenance. There is no complex thought required. And just like the physical crash after a junk food binge, the cognitive crash leaves you feeling drained. You close the app after an hour, the screen goes dark, and you are left sitting in the quiet room with a profound sense of emptiness. You literally think to yourself, what did I just do with my brain?
And the way we trick ourselves into that state is so insidious. The text points out a scenario that is almost painfully relatable. It's the illusion of the quick check. You know, you're waiting for water to boil, or you just sat down on the edge of the bed to take your shoes off, and you whisper that little lie to yourself, I'll just look for 2 minutes.
It's the modern siren song.
Yeah.
And the text note's a cruel irony here. Our phones are the most honest critics of that lie. The built-in screen time trackers don't care about your intentions. They simply record the reality. Those instances of just 2 more minutes seamlessly stitched themselves together. You sit down on the edge of the bed, believing you are taking a brief mental pause, and the next thing you know, the lighting in the room has changed because the sun went down.
The specific timeline the text uses to illustrate this is chilling. You fall into a loop of short, rapid-fire videos. You're swiping, you're mildly entertained, you feel like maybe 20 minutes have passed. Then you finally look up at a clock on the wall and it's been an hour and 40 minutes.
An hour and 40 minutes.
An hour and 40 minutes of your one finite life just gone.
The author refers to this specific duration, that massive, unaccounted for block of time lost to the feed, as the premium brain rot package.
The premium package, I love that phrasing.
It's an apt description because of the nature of the content within that package. It is entirely disjointed. You might watch 10 seconds of a cooking tutorial, followed by a political argument, followed by a cat falling off a table, followed by a tragic news update.
The emotional whiplash of that is insane when you really think about it. You are forcing your brain to process joy, anger, humor, and despair in 60-second intervals for almost 2 hours. No wonder we feel weird when we put the phone down.
Right, there's no central theme.
None. There was no intentionality behind the consumption. You didn't sit down to watch a documentary about a subject you care about. You just surrendered your sensory input to an algorithm.
Which brings us to a massive paradox that the material explicitly calls out something that anyone interested in optimizing their life needs to fully grasp. It's the fundamental disconnect between mental fatigue and physical fatigue.
Okay, let's get into this.
Consider that hour and 40 minutes you just spent on the edge of the bed. Physiologically, your body was at complete rest. Your heart rate was likely close to baseline. Your muscles were relaxed. You're doing nothing. But internally, your cognitive machinery was running at a sprint. Your mind feels like it just completed a decathlon.
This is the trap I see so many people fall into, and I've been entirely guilty of it myself. We walk around carrying this immense sense of exhaustion. We tell our friends, we tell ourselves, I'm just too busy. I don't have the energy to read that book. I don't have the capacity to start going to the gym. I don't have time to work on my side project.
We genuinely believe our lives are overstuffed.
We do. But then the screen time report comes in on Sunday morning, and it completely shatters that narrative. It shows an average of 4 hours a day on social media. We do have the time. We do have the baseline energy.
The revelation here is that you aren't physically tired. Your cognitive reserves are simply depleted. You've spent all your decision-making power, all your emotional regulation, and all your attention on a chaotic stream of digital noise. The feeling of being mentally drained doesn't mean you've done hard work. It often just means your brain is tired of processing irrelevancy. You haven't engaged your body, but you have thoroughly exhausted your mind on things that 30 seconds after watching them, you can't even remember.
That transition from I'm physically resting to I am mentally devastated is fascinating. and it forces us to look closer at the actual mechanics of the behavior. What is actually happening in the moment we are scrolling? The text spends a significant amount of time breaking down the physical act, particularly the phenomenon we all know as doom scrolling. And the way it's described goes far beyond just having a bad habit.
The definition provided in the material is quite precise. Doom scrolling isn't just mindlessly looking at funny memes. It is the specific act of continuously scrolling through negative, terrifying, or enraging content, even when you are acutely aware that it is actively damaging your mood.
You can feel it happening.
Exactly. You can feel your chest tightening. You can feel your anxiety rising. You know intellectually that reading another angry comment thread is going to ruin your evening, and yet the behavior continues.
The metaphor the author uses to describe this exact moment is probably the most terrifying and accurate image in the entire document. They describe the experience of doom scrolling as being trapped in a car.
It's a great visual.
It really is. Your thumb is the one driving the vehicle, and your conscious brain is just a terrified passenger strapped into the backseat screaming, "Please stop, pull over." But the thumb just ignores you, keeps its foot on the gas, and says, just one more post, just one more swipe.
It highlights a profound loss of agency. When you enter that specific scrolling loop, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, for rational thought, for your self-improvement goals, is essentially overridden.
It just shuts down.
Pretty much. A much older, more primal, habit-driven part of your basal ganglia has taken control of your motor functions. The physical action of the thumb swiping up has become decoupled from your conscious intent. You are, in a very real sense, acting against your own survival instinct to seek safety and peace.
And the text makes it clear that this isn't just about ruining your mood for one evening. This repeated action is fundamentally rewiring the baseline mechanics of how our minds operate. The erosion of the attention span is the real casualty here. We toss the phrase short attention span around casually, but the metrics the author uses to illustrate the contrast are staggering.
The juxtaposition is vital to understand the depth of the issue. The text points out that a completely average person today can sit and effortlessly consume 60 consecutive short videos. If each video is 15 to 30 seconds long, the brain processes this rapid-fire delivery of 60 entirely different narratives, settings, and emotions without a hint of fatigue. The user feels entirely comfortable. But if you ask that exact same person to sit and watch one single, continuous, slowly paced 20-minute video, say, a lecture or a deep documentary, it feels agonizingly slow.
Their brain rebels.
Yes. It starts asking, why is the camera lingering on this shot? Why is this person talking so slowly? When is the scene going to change?
Or take the ultimate analog test, which the text also brings up, reading a physical book. You decide you're going to be productive. You put the phone in another room, you sit down in a comfortable chair, you open a novel, and you start reading. The text argues that for many people, they can get through exactly 2 pages before their brain essentially throws a tantrum.
A tantrum is the perfect word for it.
It aggressively interrupts the reading process, generating this physical feeling of antsiness, asking, where is the notification? Where is the sudden burst of color? Where is the dopamine hit?
This is a critical point of analysis. Why does the brain react with comfort to 60 chaotic videos, but with physical discomfort to a static page of text? It's because the attention span hasn't merely shortened, it has been fundamentally fragmented. Through repetitive digital consumption, the brain has been actively trained to expect a context switch every few seconds. It anticipates a new visual stimulus, a sudden sound effect, a shift in narrative tone. When you ask that same brain to sustain focus on black text on white paper for 3 uninterrupted minutes, you are starving it of the chaos it has come to rely on. The discomfort you feel when trying to read isn't boredom. It is a very real neurological withdrawal symptom.
I want to dive deep into that specific feeling, that uncomfortable, itchy feeling when we try to do something quiet. Because the text presents a paradigm shift here that honestly made me put the material down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
I know exactly which part you mean.
Right. We have this culturally accepted narrative that we pull our phones out of our pockets because we are bored, we're in line at the grocery store, we're bored, so we scroll. But the author completely flips this upside down. They argue that most of us haven't felt true boredom in years. What we are actually feeling is overstimulation.
It is a brilliant reframing of the problem. Overstimulation disguised as boredom. To understand this, we need to look at what being overstimulated actually entails in the modern context. Your brain is a processing engine, and right now it is receiving a volume of incoming data that is historically unprecedented.
It's just a constant flood.
You're processing work emails, Slack messages, group chats, breaking news alerts, background music, the television playing in the other room, and the hyper-curated lives of 500 acquaintances on social media, often simultaneously.
The metaphor the author deploys here is incredibly vivid. They compare the modern mind to a busy market. Imagine living your entire life, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, standing in the dead center of an ancient, chaotic bazaar. There are merchants screaming their prices, animals making noise, bells ringing, people bumping into your shoulders, the smells of spices and smoke everywhere.
Now imagine the physiological state your body would have to maintain to survive in that market. Your sympathetic nervous system would be locked into a state of high alert. Your cortisol levels would be elevated. You would be constantly scanning your environment for threats or opportunities. Your brain would adapt to that chaos as the new baseline reality.
And then suddenly someone pulls you out of that market and drops you into a completely silent, empty, white room. What happens? You don't feel instantly relaxed.
No, not at all.
You feel terrified. The silence is deafening. The absence of noise feels like an emergency. And this is exactly the tragic side effect the text points out. Because our nervous systems are so conditioned to the busy market of our digital lives, normal, gentle, quiet human activities begin to feel completely alien and alarming.
The examples provided in the material illustrate how deeply our baseline has been fractured. The author talks about activities that, for centuries, were considered the baseline of human relaxation. Sitting at a kitchen table, drinking a cup of hot tea, and simply staring out the window at the rain. Sitting in a chair and reading a chapter of a book. Or even just sitting across a table and holding a sustained, unbroken conversation with one single person without glancing at a smartwatch.
The text argues that for the modern, overstimulated person, these gentle activities start to feel strangely difficult. You sit with the tea, and within 30 seconds, your leg starts bouncing. You start patting your pockets, looking for your phone. You think to yourself, I'm bored. This is boring.
But you are bored.
Exactly. Your nervous system is just exhausted and deeply confused by the sudden lack of input. It's waiting for the next merchant in the market to scream at you. And when it doesn't happen, it panics.
This realization is absolutely foundational for anyone trying to implement self-improvement.
Yeah.
If you misdiagnose the problem as boredom, your instinct will always be to add more stimulation to fix it. You'll listen to a podcast while watching a YouTube video while scrolling a feed.
Which just makes it worse.
Far worse.
Yeah.
But if you correctly diagnose the problem as overstimulation, the cure completely changes. You realize that you cannot fix an overwhelmed nervous system by throwing more data at it. You have to endure the discomfort of the quiet. You have to actively train your brain to tolerate the absence of the busy market until the quiet stops feeling like a void and starts feeling like peace.
That distinction between the void and peace naturally brings up the whole concept of escapism. Because I can hear a completely valid argument forming. Maybe a listener is thinking this right now, or maybe it's just my own inner voice trying to defend my habits. The argument goes, look, my job is incredibly stressful. The news is terrifying. I have a million responsibilities. I am allowed to watch my shows or play my games to relax. I need an escape.
And that impulse is entirely human and totally valid. The text doesn't argue that we should be perfectly productive robots from the moment we wake up until we sleep. The desire to retreat from the pressures of life is necessary. However, the author draws a very sharp, very critical line between healthy relaxation and unhealthy escapism.
Let's break down that line. Unhealthy escapism, as defined by the material, is using an activity solely to numb yourself. It is running away from your feelings, your anxiety, or your problems without ever processing them or facing them. It's not a restorative pause. It's just a pause button on your consciousness. And the terrifying thing is, the anxiety doesn't disappear while you're numbed out.
No, it just waits for you.
Right. The second the screen goes black, all those problems rush back in, often feeling heavier than before.
The physical manifestation of this unhealthy escapism is what the text labels the couch potato identity. This represents the highly inactive state where immense blocks of time are surrendered to passive consumption. You are sitting, you are watching, but you are not engaging.
The author paints a picture of the lost Sunday that is so accurate it almost hurts to read. We've all experienced this day. You wake up on a Sunday morning, you grab the phone from the nightstand before your feet even hit the floor. Eventually, you migrate from the bed to the couch. You decide to start a new TV show. You watch one episode, then the countdown timer automatically starts the next one, and you just let it happen. You order delivery so you don't have to cook. You do absolutely nothing physical. You barely look out the window.
And the crucial metric here isn't just what you did. It's how you feel at the end of it. How does the couch potato feel at 8 p.m. on that Sunday?
They feel awful. The text perfectly describes the aftermath. You don't feel refreshed and ready to tackle Monday. You feel physically heavy. You feel a deep, sluggish fatigue. You feel a weird kind of hollow emptiness in your chest. You look around the dark living room and think, wow, I did absolutely nothing today to expend energy, and yet I am more exhausted than if I had hiked a mountain.
That specific flavor of exhaustion is the hallmark of unhealthy escapism. It is a process that actively depletes your life force. Now, contrast this heavily with what the text identifies as healthy escapism, because the author makes it clear. A hobby is also a form of escape.
Right.
When you go into your garage to build a birdhouse, or you go out to the garden to pull weeds, or you sit down at a piano, you're absolutely escaping from the stress of your job and the weight of your daily responsibilities.
Yeah.
You're stepping out of the real world for a moment.
But the mechanics of the escape are fundamentally different. Here is where the self-improvement aspect really takes center stage. The critical difference between the couch potato and the piano player isn't just the activity itself, it's the aftermath. It is how you feel when you return from the escape.
Precisely. The material provides a highly relatable personal anecdote to crystallize this difference. The author describes a period in their own life where their nightly routine consisted of watching 3 or 4 episodes of a television show. It served its purpose in the moment. It distracted them from their day. But they noticed a pattern. They always went to bed feeling that heavy, sluggish emptiness. They were escaping, but they were deteriorating in the process.
So they make a shift, and it's not a monumental shift. They don't sell their TV and move to a cabin in the woods. They simply substitute a portion of that viewing time with a different kind of escape. They pick up their guitar, which had probably been collecting dust in the corner, and they play it for 20 minutes.
Just 20 minutes.
Okay.
A fraction of the time they would have spent watching a single episode.
Right. But the result of those 20 minutes completely alters their psychological state. They still got their escape from the workday. They still gave their brain a break from their problems. But when they put the guitar back on the stand, they didn't feel empty. They went to bed feeling a sense of pride. They felt a spark of vitality. They felt alive.
This is the core thesis of the author's argument. One kind of escape, passive consumption, leaves you more tired and hollow. The other kind of escape, active creation, leaves you more alive, more energized, and more capable. It is the difference between hiding from the world and healing yourself so you can face the world again.
Which naturally leads us to the solution. We've diagnosed the brain rot, we understand the physical reality of doom scrolling, we recognize the trap of the busy market, and we see the stark difference in how we choose to escape. The question is, how do we defend ourselves?
That's the big question.
The antidote, according to the material, is hobbies. But I want to be very careful here because the text forces us to completely redefine what a hobby actually is.
Yes, the word hobby has a somewhat diminutive reputation in modern culture. We tend to view hobbies as just cute, trivial activities for people with too much free time. We think of them as secondary to the real work of life. The author argues that this completely diminishes their power. In the context of a hyper-digital, overstimulated world, a hobby is not a triviality. It is an active, necessary defense mechanism for your cognitive health.
The defining characteristic of a true hobby, according to this framework, is the word active. It requires you to be a creator rather than merely a consumer. When you are caught in the doom scroll or when you are binge watching 6 hours of television, your role is purely passive. You are a receptacle. You are letting the noise of the busy market wash over you.
You're just taking it in.
Exactly. But when you engage in a hobby, even the simple one, you flip the switch. You are making decisions. You are manipulating physical objects. You are bringing something into existence that wasn't there before, whether it's a sketch on a notepad, a planted seed in the dirt, or a sequence of chords on an instrument.
And this transition from passive consumer to active creator triggers a massive psychological benefit that the text highlights. It fundamentally shifts your internal identity narrative. This is where the profound self-improvement implications become clear.
Identity is huge here.
It really is.
Hmm.
Identity isn't just who you say you are. It's the story you tell yourself based on your daily actions. If your entire routine consists of waking up, working, coming home, eating dinner on the couch, and scrolling on your phone until you fall asleep, your brain internalizes a very specific narrative. You become the couch potato.
Yeah.
Your internal monologue says, I am someone who eats and scrolls.
And that identity is incredibly hard to break out of because every night you provide yourself with fresh evidence that it's true. But the moment you introduce an active hobby, you introduce a disruption to that narrative. You force your brain to rewrite the story.
Exactly. You evolve. By taking action in the physical world, your internal narrative shifts. You can suddenly look to yourself and say, I am a painter. I am a runner. I am a woodworker. I am someone who tends to a garden. The author makes a very compassionate and realistic point here. Adopting this new identity doesn't mean you must banish all passive relaxation forever.
You don't have to be perfect.
No, not at all. You might still sit on the sofa and watch a movie on a Friday night. You don't have to be relentlessly productive every waking second. But the crucial shift is that you are no longer just a couch potato. You have diversified your sense of self.
And through that active creation, you unlock access to a psychological state that the text refers to with a phrase I absolutely love, losing yourself in something.
It's a poetic description of what psychologists refer to as the flow state. It is the exact polar opposite of the premium brain rot package we discussed earlier.
Let's compare those two experiences of time because it's fascinating. When you are deep in brain rot, doom scrolling on the edge of the bed, you are absolutely losing track of time. But how does it feel when you snap out of it? Awful.
It feels shameful. It feels like a theft. You look at the clock and think, where did that hour go? I have nothing to show for it.
But when you lose yourself in a healthy analog hobby, the time distortion is experienced entirely differently. You sit down at your desk with a piece of paper and a pencil, intending to sketch for just 10 minutes. You get absorbed in the shading, the lines, the physical friction of the graphite on the paper. Suddenly you look up, and an hour has passed.
But you don't feel robbed. You feel incredible. You feel nourished.
Precisely. You feel nourished because you are actively engaged. The text brilliantly contrasts this with the concept of brain rot by calling it brain growth. You walk away from that hour feeling intellectually and spiritually full. You gave your mind a rich, complex meal instead of a handful of digital junk food. Now, I can imagine someone listening to this and feeling a bit overwhelmed. They might be thinking, this all sounds beautiful in theory, but after a 10-hour shift and a stressful commute, the idea of finding a hobby, buying supplies, and trying to become a master painter or marathon runner feels like an impossible mountain to climb. I just don't have the energy for a massive life overhaul.
And that is the completely rational response to fatigue. But this is where the material delivers incredibly good news. Breaking the cycle of overstimulation and reclaiming your identity does not require a massive life overhaul. It does not require you to become an expert in anything. The author introduces a deeply evocative phrase for the solution: breathing life into your day.
Breathing life into your day. It implies that the day has gone stale, that it's suffocating under the weight of routine and screens, and it just needs a small gasp of fresh air to revive it.
That's exactly it. To breathe life into your day means to insert a moment that makes you feel fresh, awake, and internally alive. It is about intentionally interrupting the monotonous, graining sequence of consumption with a tiny spark of active engagement. And the best part is the incredibly low barrier to entry.
The text is adamant about this. You do not need a grand, complex plan. You do not need to drop $500 on specialized equipment. You do not need to create a spreadsheet tracking 5 different new habits. The expert advice boils down to this: you just need one thing, one analog activity.
The examples provided in the transcript highlight just how remarkably small and accessible this spark can be. The author suggests things like spending 15 minutes just dancing in your living room to music you love, taking 10 minutes to meticulously water and wipe the leaves of your houseplants, trying to cook one single new recipe for dinner instead of ordering takeout, sitting down and writing one page in a physical journal before you turn out the light.
It's almost startling how mundane the examples are, but that's the genius of it. The specific activity itself matters far less than the active, non-digital nature of it. It's the act of using your hands and your physical presence.
Let's look at the mathematical power of this concept because it is disproportionate to the time invested. Consider the daily equation of someone deeply trapped in the brain rot cycle. Their entire Monday through Friday can be distilled into a simple, bleak formula: work plus phone plus sleep. That is the entire texture of their existence for 5 days.
It's a gray, featureless block of time.
But watch what happens to the math when you insert just a tiny 20-minute block of active creation into that equation. 20 minutes is an incredibly small fraction of your waking hours, barely over 1% of your day. Yet the psychological weight of those 20 minutes is immense.
Because it acts as a temporal landmark. I love this concept. When your week is just a blur of screens, your brain has nothing to anchor to. It doesn't record the 400th video you watched on Tuesday, so Tuesday just vanishes from your memory. But when you spend 20 minutes on Wednesday night trying to learn how to fold an origami grain or meticulously repotting a plant, your brain records that.
It changes how the entire week feels in retrospect. When you look back on a week where you microdosed life, you don't just see a depressing blur of the busy market. You see the specific evening you struggled to learn a new chord on the guitar. You remember the smell of the new spices you tried on Thursday. You recall the feeling of the dirt on your hands on Saturday morning. That one tiny insertion of analog reality shifts the entire output of your week. It stretches time out and makes your life feel richer and more textured.
It is arguably the ultimate self-improvement hack. You are proving to yourself on a daily basis that you are a creator, not just a consumer. You are actively repairing your attention span for 20 minutes a day. And as the text suggests, that momentum begins to build.
It certainly does. And the source material takes this concept of momentum one step further, offering a brilliant strategy for compounding your efforts. This brings us to the final and perhaps most practical application of these ideas. We must remember the original context of the transcript we are analyzing. It was designed for people trying to learn a new language.
Right, the self-improvement multiplier. The author shows how you can take this protective shield, your analog hobby, and use it as an engine for broader educational goals. Let's say you have a goal of learning a new language. For the sake of the text, it's English, but it could be Spanish, Japanese, anything. The traditional approach is to make language learning another stressful task on an already long to-do list. You buy a textbook, you download flashcards, and you force yourself to study.
And for a brain that is already exhausted by the busy market, adding a task that feels like homework is almost guaranteed to fail. The friction is simply too high. But the text suggests a brilliant integration fused the language learning directly with the hobby that is already breathing life into your day.
The practical examples they give are so simple but so effective. If your chosen hobby, the thing that gets you away from doom scrolling, is cooking, don't just cook in silence. Watch the recipe tutorials in the language you are trying to learn. Write out your own grocery lists or recipe modifications in that target language.
If your hobby is playing a specific video game, and while gaming is digital, an active problem-solving game is very different from passive scrolling. Join a community server where they only speak the language you are learning. If photography is the thing that brings you joy, commit to writing all your photo captions or journal entries about your shots in that target language.
I want to unpack the underlying psychology of why this works so much better than traditional studying. Because it's not just about saving time, it fundamentally alters how the brain categorizes the learning process.
Exactly. When we approach learning as a formal discipline, we typically place it into a mental box labeled homework, exams, obligation, and stress. We associate it with our school days. It feels heavy. The affective filter, the psychological wall built by anxiety and pressure, goes up, making it harder to absorb information. But when you tether the language acquisition to your hobby, you bypass that filter entirely. You move the goal out of the stress box and wire it directly into the brain's joy center.
You are literally hacking the flow state. You are taking that beautiful, nourished feeling of losing yourself in an activity, and you are sneaking the educational material in through the side door.
You really are. The practice of the new language becomes a natural, friction-free byproduct of doing something you already intrinsically love. It is organic personal growth. The very same analog activity that is serving as your defensive shield against the brain rot, the doom scrolling, and the fragmentation of your attention span is simultaneously acting as a high-powered engine for acquiring a valuable new life skill. It's a compounding return on your investment of 20 minutes.
It is such an elegant solution to a modern problem. You aren't just surviving the digital landscape. You are actively utilizing analog joy to upgrade your own capabilities. You are taking back your bandwidth and putting it to work for your own self-improvement.
And it all begins with the simple recognition that your brain isn't broken and you aren't fundamentally lazy. Your nervous system is just overwhelmed and your mind is hungry for something real to chew on.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. Let's do a quick conversational wrap-up of the journey we've taken through this material. We started by diagnosing brain rot. We established that it isn't a disease, but rather the heavy, sluggish, emotional hangover that results from forcing our brains to consume hours of low-quality, chaotic digital content.
We examined the physical realities of the doom scroll, the terrifying moment when the thumb takes the wheel and the conscious brain is held hostage. We looked at how this constant barrage of microstimuli fundamentally fragments our attention spans, effectively rewiring us until the simple, slow act of reading a physical book feels physically agonizing.
We tackled what I think is the biggest misconception of the digital age. the idea that we are bored, we realize that we are actually suffering from profound overstimulation. We are trapped in the busy market, and because our baseline has been so elevated, the quiet, gentle moments of a normal human life suddenly feel alien and terrifying to our exhausted nervous systems.
We drew a very hard, necessary line between unhealthy escapism and healthy escapism. We explore the tragic figure of the couch potato, hiding from the world only to wake up feeling empty and depleted. And we contrasted that with the person who engages in active creation, the hobbyist who escapes into a task and returns to their life feeling a renewed sense of pride and energy.
We redefined what a hobby actually is. It's not a cute time waster. It is an active identity builder. It is the tool we use to shift our internal narrative from I am someone who scrolls to I am someone who creates. We talked about the power of the flow state, of losing yourself in an activity and experiencing actual brain growth instead of brain rot.
And crucially, we demystified the process. We saw that reclaiming your life doesn't require hours of free time. Just 20 minutes of active analog engagement is enough to breathe life into your day, to break the monotonous work phone sleep cycle, and to create a temporal landmark that makes your week feel meaningful. And as a final bonus, we saw how that same hobby could be used as a joy-based engine for self-improvement goals, like learning a language.
The overarching takeaway for me is that taking back control of your attention span doesn't require a magic pill. It doesn't require you to purchase a new course or download a restrictive productivity app. In fact, adding more software is the opposite of the goal here. Reclaiming your mind simply requires a willingness to step away from the glowing rectangle and interact with the physical, tangible world around you.
That's really the core of it.
So to leave you with a final piece of food for thought, directly inspired by the author of the material we studied, I want you to imagine a hypothetical scenario. Imagine that someone followed you around and recorded a video of how you spent every minute of your free time for one entire week. If you were forced to sit down and watch that tape back, what would the overarching theme be? Would the tape look like a documentary of brain rot, or would it look like a story of brain growth?
It's a confronting thought experiment, and it is absolutely vital to add a note of profound reassurance here. If you are listening to this and you are being honest with yourself and your answer is, my tape would definitely look like brain rot, please understand that this does not mean you are a bad person. It does not mean you lack discipline, and it certainly doesn't mean you were uniquely broken. It simply means that your brain, like millions of others, has been caught in a highly engineered trap, and it is starving for real nourishment. You have the power to change the narrative of the tape. You don't have to change your whole life today. You can start with just 10 minutes of analog reality tonight.
Just 10 minutes. Put the phone in a drawer and go touch something real.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And to build on everything we've discussed today, I'm going to leave you with one final new thought to mull over. We've talked extensively about how engaging in analog hobbies can repair your own attention span and rebuild your own identity. But consider the ripple effect. If you actually do this, if you unplug, reclaim your focus, and start finding deep flow in the physical world, how does that alter your relationship with the rest of society?
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about it. If you become the only person in your household or your friend group or your workplace who can comfortably sit in silence, read a book, or listen to a story without checking a screen, do you become an inspiration? Or do you become an alien to the people who are still trapped in the busy market? As our collective ability to focus continues to fracture, are we heading toward a future where a new kind of social divide emerges, not based on wealth or class, but entirely based on who still have an attention span and who doesn't?
Now, that is a truly fascinating and somewhat chilling thought to take with us. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Go out there, put the screen away for a little while, and breathe some life into your day.